where the fun begins.
You underestimate my power!
What truly makes Darth Vader such a great villain? Or better yet, what actually makes someone a villain? Is it power, fear, greed, or simply their willingness to enact horrible atrocities? These are very important questions that must be answered to figure out the root of what makes Darth Vader such a global phenomenon and overall very distinguished villain. So it's May 25th, 1977. You head on into your nearest cinema to watch Star Wars A New Hope. Roughly around the 4-minute mark, a legend is born. But with only around 9 minutes of screen time in a 2-hour long movie, what made him stand out to new viewers? He didn't really show off his true power, or have any expressive lines, like some.
Why so serious?
Not to mention he wasn't relatable in the slightest at the time. He was more or less just a voiceless character, void of really anything. Wait, that's it. A void. Emptiness, nothingness. This is how Vader's presence made every scene feel, almost as if you were hooked into the same breathing machine that resided inside of him, or that you were one of his victims, who he inflicted his own pain on, forcing them to watch themselves through the reflection in his deep dark eyes. This all plays into one of the most iconic features about Darth Vader, his breathing, which quickly became a haunting alarm to those unlucky enough to hear it. Now, let's fast forward 22 years into the future, where we see the beginning of the beloved prequels, finally giving us a deeper look into the Star Wars universe and the characters in it. At this time, Vader was already a pre-established villain though, so they could have easily just wrote off the hype of the long-awaited return of Star Wars. But George Lucas sat down and decided to make it better.
Darth Vader became such an icon in the first film, Episode 4, that that icon of evil sort of took over everything, much more than I intended. If it had been one movie, that wouldn't have happened. He would have been revealed to be this pathetic character at the end of the movie. But now by adding episodes 1, 2, and 3, people begin to see the tragedy of Darth Vader.
Since Anakin was a child, he always yearned for purpose that would slowly become a need for power, which he needed to save his mother alongside the love of his life. It was inevitable that he would fail at both, eventually resulting in him taking his frustrations out on the Tuskens. This would begin to fuel his hate, quickly consuming every positive aspect of his life, until he would ultimately lose his sense of purpose, therefore allowing Darth Sidious to twist his view of the Jedi Order, fully feeding into his dark side until Anakin was no more. Now, when you ignore some of the imperfections in the prequels and solely pay attention to Anakin, you will see the risks they took to make Darth Vader go from an unrelatable and intimidating villain to a relatable and complex character. Really what I'm trying to say here is that a great villain can be fun to watch, but a broken hero just adds a level of complexity that makes him that much better. Will he ever return back to the hero he once was, or will he continue to descend into madness? This is the same reason fans will line up for an evil Superman or Spider-Man, because seeing the people we root for doing something so out of character makes us want to root for them even harder, and better yet, sympathize with them. We've all had our fall from grace, making huge mistakes, doing things we wish we could take back, but also deep down knowing that everyone including ourselves deserves a second chance, the chance to change, and a chance to grow. Now, it goes without saying that Anakin's pain and loss is what makes him stand out. Sure, other characters in Star Wars have gone through the same amount of suffering as him, but with Anakin it's not about the suffering itself, it's more about the way he reacts to it. He destroyed everything he worked so hard to protect, believing that what he was doing was for the greater good.
I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire.
This would stem from his need to prove himself, something he would grasp onto at a very young age. You see, Anakin's childhood was sad and bleak, so he began to seek quick thrills, always dreaming of more, knowing the vast amounts of possibilities that lie in the galaxy far, far away, but all of them being just out of reach. Then, after finally getting the adventure he has always wanted, he is forced to deal with the loss of his mother, leading him to seek revenge, while also forming his resentment towards the Jedi. This is why it makes sense that his thoughts could be twisted so easily, as when he would express his fears, he would be disregarded, and when he looked for answers, he would be shut down. This would cause Anakin to feel alienated around his Jedi peers, until Palpatine enters his life. who for the most part gave him the truth, with only some of it being fabricated to gain his trust. This is to be expected though, as he is the overarching villain of the prequels. This begins to make Anakin's fall of the dark side feel a bit more earned than just expected. However, when you begin to look at Anakin's perspective of the Jedi, you start to truly understand where he is coming from. Though his actions were a bit irrational, it makes sense why he acted the way he did. The dark side was twisting his every thought, using his fear of loss to fuel his hate, but it goes a bit deeper than that. As I mentioned earlier, the death of his mother is where his resentment of the Jedi began. This would be expanded upon when he was forced to hide his love for Padme, later not even being allowed to obtain the skills necessary to save her from death, which was the same thing that aided in the loss of his mother. So he swore to not let the Jedi get in the way this time, doing anything in his power to save the love of his life, or more selfishly, to put an end to his pain and suffering. But as we all know, his actions only made his suffering that much worse. Now, I wanted to talk about Luke's big role in making Darth Vader such a good character. During the events of the original trilogy, we know that Vader believed he had fully gotten rid of his light side.
Anakin's gone. I am what remains.
So pretty much the whole time Luke wasn't just the protagonist, he was also a shadow of Vader's past, causing a divide between his hate and suffering. This would later come back together to take on the form of sadness, ultimately creating an internal struggle between his light and dark sides, which yet again makes it feel more rewarding when we see him become Anakin once more. I personally believe the struggle between his light and dark sides began happening during this exact moment. I mean, it's beautiful. He stops his son from making the same mistakes he did so many years ago. This leads up to Vader finally allowing his compassion for others to return, saving his son and the galaxy from the Emperor's rule. Now, from here you might think Darth Vader's success as both a villain and a character would start to flatten out a bit, but that couldn't be further from the truth. You see, LucasArts decided to take Darth Vader a step further by pushing him into every bit of media they could. Toys, games, shirts, shows, movies, drinks, food, memes, I mean, he was everywhere. And they didn't stop his story there. As some more die-hard fans know, they continued to flesh out his character in well-known comics, along with some novels as well, giving us a better understanding of the purely evil things he managed to do, allowing for a more complex narrative to be developed through the character, creating more tangible reasons for the galaxy to fear his insane level of power. I mean, the 2017 Darth Vader comics really start to break him down as a character. We get to see him internally battle his failures, fight the ghosts of his past, as well as lose any hope of bringing back the love of his life. This all perfectly lines up with the character we see in A New Hope: dark, quiet, and cold. Now, Darth Vader may not be as fun to watch as villains like the Joker, or as compelling as Thanos in the MCU.
I am inevitable.
However, what he has that they don't is Anakin, the compassionate side of himself that at one point in time made him the greatest hero in the entire galaxy, allowing for Darth Vader to stand out from the rest as not just a shallow villain, but a broken hero. His fear of loss, hatred of failure, and desperation to prove his strength is what makes him so captivating to watch. So when you ask, what really makes a great villain? It's quite simple. You need a relatable or reasonable cause for their actions, and this explains Anakin perfectly. He's a relatable character with a reasonable cause for his actions, which is why I believe Darth Vader is one of the greatest villains of all time.